Hello everyone, this is Stephanie from mommywithahobby.com, and today I will be working on a 9x9 watercolor paper that I have binded using some expander rings. And I made this art journal, I DIY'd this art journal, and it was inspired by Vicky here on YouTube. I won't say her last name because I'm afraid I will botch it. So let me get started. So I pull one of the watercolor papers off of the rings and I insert it into a box, and I am using 3 different distress colored stains. This is cracked pistachio, then I go in with Mermaid Lagoon and Broken China. And I'm trying to create a background that has a lot of dripping effect and a lot of blue hues because of the quote that I will be using. And the watercolor is a porous surface, so the stains do not kind of have this alcohol almost effect. So I went in with a dry brush and smeared it to the edges, make sure that there was nothing white on the page. Then I go in with cracked pistachio and just kind of really saturate it with that stain color onto the watercolor, and it allowed to have a really nice dripping effect once it was dry. Now I was impatient and did not let it dry. I did use a heat gun, but however I did make sure to move around the heat gun to give me that drippage effect. So next I'm using some distressed stamping paper here, and I'm using these stamps, Essential Silhouettes by Dina Wakley. And these are a set. It comes with the stamp and a stencil, which I will use later. So first I'm stamping off this image that looks like it's a silhouette that's dancing, or, I don't know, just kind of being very happy. Then I stamp the other 2 images, which look like models, and I think that's what the stamps were supposed to be, more like model type silhouettes. And next I go back with my background after it's fully dried and went in with some distress glaze, and I grab a little bit at a time and I'm smearing it all over the page here. And that's because the stain does, even after it's dry, I felt it pulling off the page. So I just wanted to make sure that the color will not smear onto other pages. And then I just rubbed off the excess with a cloth. Next, I'm coming in with this block scripted stamp. It's a Lord's Prayer scripted stamp. That's what I had on hand. If you would like to recreate this background, you can use any type of script that you have. This is just what I had on my stash. So I'm being very not careful at all, just inking the words up very loosely, and then I'm just stamping it. And I like the effect. It almost looks like there is a newspaper or some type of book in the background. I just like having scripted stamping in my backgrounds when I'm art journaling. I think it just gives it a really nice effect. So next I am bringing in some of the Bo Bunny Rough It Up stamp set, and it gives you 3 options for like backgrounds to give you kind of some type of effect on your page. And I went with this cracked stamped that looks like cracked concrete, or like a cracked dried muddy, um, I don't know, something that's cracked. I've seen mud that cracks. But anyways, going back, and next I'm using the Crafters work the Crafters Workshop stencil here. This is the Art Is mini scripted stencil, and I am bringing in some of the Dimensional Effects Deco Art. This is some paintable texture paste. And so this paste actually dries clear, and it will actually, it would have a raised effect on the page, but I want it to remain white. So I am mixing it with some regular white acrylic paint. You can use gesso as well. And I am rubbing that on with a spatula. And again, I'm not being very careful. I'm kind of being loosely. That's the beauty of mixed media art, is there is no rules that you need to follow or be very careful, because it's mixed media. It's meant to look grungy um, and just very, loose art. So next, I am using the stencil that comes with the stamp set from the Dina Wakley Essential Silhouette Stamp and Stencil Set. And I'm using these circles here. I want it to look like there is like rain coming down. So that was the effect I was going for with these circles. So next I go in with my heat tool and I heat set everything, make sure that all of that texture paste is nice and dry before I work on my page some more. Next I put my watercolor page back on the box, and I am making sure once again that everything is dry. And I'm going to spray a little bit of the Heidi Swap color shine and in the color teal, and it gave it a nice shimmery effect on my art journal page here. Next I'm going with this Dilutions Hearts Edge stamp and stencil set, and I'm using this stamp that goes well with the border here that has some circles. And I am again being very loose. I'm not really trying to get every single edge, just what I can, because I know that the stencil and the texture paste areas is harder to stamp, so I'm not being too careful there. Next I'm just grabbing my Faber-Castell white Pip pen, and I am using that to fill in the circles with that pen. And then this is an old stamp that I got at Hobby Lobby, and it's from Judy Kiss. It is retired, I believe. And I just used a little bit of StazOn white ink and inked that up. And then I'm using this flowery, well, it's not a flower, it's more of a leafy border stamp, and that comes with the Hearts Edge Dilution Stamp and Stencil Set. And I'm stamping that with some archival cobalt ink. Next, I'm just using a gold pen to fill in some of those border squares. And then I'm going back in with the archival ink in color cobalt, and I am framing my art journal page with distressing the edges. And that's just something I like to do with anything, really. Even when I'm card making, there's just something about inking up the edges that just gives it a nice effect, especially because I'm very keen on vintage stuff and junky. I don't know, I really like that vibe. I think that's why I'm really drawn to the Tim Holtz supply line, because of his taste is kind of similar to mine, or mine is similar to his, whichever way you want to look at it. So here I am just putting some black acrylic paint onto an acrylic block, adding some water, and using the edge of the acrylic block to do these splashes onto my watercolor paper. Next, I couldn't find my archival black ink, so I'm using VersaFine Onyx black ink here, and I'm using my sponge here to distress the edges even more on my art journal page. And I think that doing this just really frames your art journal. I really like, if you watch Vicky on YouTube. She does a lot of art journal pages and she frames all of her art journals, and I love that because I just think it completes the whole page. So that's why I do it. So next I'm putting all my elements onto the art journal just to see where I want everything to lay down. So finally I figure out where I want everything to be placed, and I'm using some of my Distress Mixed Media matte gel to lay everything down. And I'm just putting all that at the back and on the top of the images, so that way the images do not move anywhere. And I did stamp the quote separately in like separate lines on the page to cut out these squares. And I also stamped them with the Hero Arts individual block letters. And I went ahead and cut them out into little squares, and I put them in this configuration here. And it reads, "Life is not about waiting for the storm to pass, but learning to dance in the rain." And I am using I'm using a distress marker, and I believe the color that I am using is picked raspberry to frame the words there. And the next, I felt it needed some more interest, so I'm going in with some Nouveau Crystal Clear drops in the color Sea Breeze. Now these will dry translucent, but I still wanted to give that rain element onto my page to go with a quote. So all I'm doing is I'm adding some drops and then gliding it towards the top, so that way it looks like a droplet. And here you can see a little bit close up what I was trying to do. And on some I was careful and only had the drop, and then on some I dragged it on to create the line as if the rain was falling down. Next, I grabbed some of my Staedtler watercolor pencils, and I grabbed a watercolor paintbrush and I added some water all around my silhouettes. And then I went in with my black watercolor pencil and drew the lines where I wanted to create a shadow, and then went in with some more water with my watercolor paintbrush, and then smeared that, creating a shadow effect on all these elements. I did that for all the silhouettes, and then I went in and I did that for all of the words as well. I just think it created a finished effect around all the elements on the page, and it also added a little bit of interest, making it seem as though they were kind of popping off the page a little bit, as well as the words. The words, once I have completed all of the shadowing effect on the words, it looks like as though they're floating off the page, which is a great effect when doing mixed media. So here I'm just finishing up this image right here, adding some more water and going in with my watercolor pencil. Now the reason I go in first with water and then my watercolor pencil was because the background had the glue, and so it was hard for the pencil to um, leave the color on there. So I figured out that the best way to have the color come out of the watercolor pencil was to actually put water first and then apply the pencil over the top of the water. And here's the finished page. Now, as you can see, I'm just adding this back to the spiral expander rings here. And this was so much fun to make another art journal. Now the binder rings are a little bit bigger, but that's all that they had at the store at the time. They didn't have the smaller ones. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed this art journal entry, and I hope that you got inspired. If you like this video, please give this video a thumbs up, and if you are not already subscribed, you can go ahead and subscribe by hitting my picture. A quick congratulations to Franca Mendoza and Angela Fishburne for winning the giveaways that I had running on my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, bye-bye.